when we talk about overcoming Himalayan challenges, we know that there are several challenges that are there in the region. However, we also realize that there are several solutions that local communities come up with themselves. With that, what I want to explore in this session is how do we overcome these challenges using local solutions? How can the state support these solutions? And perhaps with the experiences of our panelists here, we will begin that. I want to start with Nikita, who's an investment manager with Dolma Fund. Nikita, please tell us what Dolma does in the Nepalese mountains. Mm-hmm. What sort of sectors are you investing in? And how are you selecting these, let's say, companies or sectors that you want to, projects that you are looking at?
Hello, everyone. I'm Nikita, investment manager at Dolma Impact Fund. So let me tell you a bit about what Dolma is and what we do. So Dolma is a $36 million fund. We started off in September 2014. Our key investors are FMO, Dutch Good Growth Fund from Netherlands. We've got OEB from Austria, and we've got FinFund from Finland, and we've got a few other high net worth individuals investing in the fund. So this $36 million is dedicated solely for Nepal. So we invest in the private companies in Nepal. So typically it's a growth stage fund, that's what we call it. So we invest in companies that are up and running and require the much needed capital to take the business to the next level. That's where we play a role. And typically our investment ticket size ranges from $500,000, and we can invest up to $5.5 million. And with this, we take minority investments in companies with some board seats and some reporting and regular monitoring and evaluation that we do. And till date, we have in the past 5 years. So this is a 10-year fund. So the first 5 years is used for investment, and the next 5 years is for exiting or harvesting, what we call it. So we are almost at the end of our investment period. So far we have invested in around 6 companies, fully invested, and in 3 other companies we have committed for investments. So there are 2 hydropower companies in our portfolio. We've got a pharmaceutical manufacturing company. We've got 2 tech companies and an e-commerce platform. We are also working with a few solar projects since solar, like with a lot of hydropower sources lighting up the country. We definitely think there is a need for some diversification in the source of energy. That's why we are also venturing into solar. And there are a lot of interest being shown by Nepalese as well as foreign investors in the solar sector, and a lot of support being shown by the government as well. So these are the sectors that we are primarily working with. But having said that, we don't say that it's a sector agnostic fund, so we are open to any sector. Definitely agriculture, education, healthcare are some of the key productive sectors and like high impact sectors that we consider while investment. And lastly, on how we assess our investment, so we call ourselves a finance first fund. So definitely our internal rate of returns and the financial benefits that the investment would bring is definitely the first calculation that we make. But having said that, we are an impact fund. We do consider the social and the environmental impact of making any investment. What are the opportunities of employment generation? What are the carbon footprints? What are women and youth employment that this investment can bring in? Are the key matrices that we also try to measure as we invest.
I just want to add to that. Could you tell us where these investments are located in terms of region?
So it's a
Nepal?
fund dedicated to Nepal. So usually the hydropowers are outside of Kathmandu. So the 2 hydropowers, one is in Dolkha region, one is in Ramechhap. The solars that we are looking into, one is in Tanohu, one is in Bajracharya. So besides that, we have a manufacturing unit, a pharmaceutical manufacturing unit, which is in the outskirts of the Kathmandu Valley, Lele, in a place called Lele. And besides that, usually the IT companies are in Kathmandu, based in Kathmandu.
Thank you, Nikita. We'll come back to you. Songqiao. So Songqiao runs a very interesting company called WildBound, and I've told her many times that I wish I was back in school when this company was doing these things. I want you to tell us more about what WildBound does and how you look at these youth, where you take these youth to different ecosystems across the world. What do you intend, or like, what is your intention at the end of the day?
Thank you, Amish. It's a pleasure to be on the same panel again, and really great to be here at the Himalayan Consensus. Our theme today is towards a shared future, and WildBound does that. We work with future generations, we work with young people, and we work with the active optimism and action towards a better future for all of humanity and other species as well. So we take young adults, youth, young professionals to expeditions on various ecosystems in the world. These include polar regions, oceans, our great mountains, the Himalayas, and personally I just came back from an expedition in Antarctica in March. And when we go to these amazing places where the sheer power of nature is present, and when you realize that human beings have only existed for a very short time on this planet, and our role is just a passerby and a tourist and a visitor or a pilgrim, that we really have the responsibility to steward for our environment and to take care of our planet. So with all the challenges we have heard from the assessment this morning, from this topic of the panel, Himalayan challenges, we see where are the opportunities, where are the commitments, and where are the action points that young people can really take into their own life, their career choices, their life choices in making this happen. So basically, WildBound focusing on educating the next generation of sustainability leaders and active citizens for sustainable development. We also do some research on environmental advocacy, and we run projects and campaigns in China that's on these ecosystem conservations.
Songqiao. Now Sonam. Sonam runs, you were a bureaucrat earlier, right? And now he runs a social entrepreneurship fund where he speaks to several social entrepreneurs in Bhutan and guides them on what they do. Sonam, please tell us more about this.
Good afternoon, everybody. So nice to be here. I've been associated with Himalayan Consensus Summit for a long time with Sujeev and Lawrence, but I have not been able to attend any of the sessions earlier, but it's good to be here this time. So basically, I have been a civil servant. I've been in the government. I've been a businessman. I did a lot of travel business, and also I run a consultancy and research firm. Besides that, I also have done two things. One is like early 2000, I started a private initiative called Beautiful Bhutan, and it is a cleanup campaign initiated by tour operators. We tour operators got together and we said, you know, our bread and butter is in keeping Bhutan beautiful and clean. So let's all pull together and let's do something about cleaning up the country. So we initiated that. It was a private initiative. It took a long time for us to make impact, but gradually it made a lot of impact. And then the government came in, and then now today we have a whole nation campaign called Clean Bhutan. Now, in fact, all this mindset changing and all this awareness was created by a private initiative that I started with the tour operators. Besides that, I also run a community service program. We started this as a weekend program. It's called BIRDS. It stands for Bhutan Innovation, Research and Development Service. And basically every weekend, a group of entrepreneurs would come together and ask anybody in the country, if you have a business idea, come over. We'll discuss and we'll help you start that business. So it's basically startup businesses, small businesses, people, young entrepreneurs wanting to start a business but don't know how to go about it. And they don't even have much time. So what we do is on a Sunday, a group of entrepreneurs who come together like this, and the young entrepreneurs who come over, and then we would discuss, choose maybe 5 really interesting business projects, and we would do a presentation on that, and then the entrepreneurs who has experience would help them fine-tune their business ideas, and would also help them, if the idea is really good, also help them find money, finance, and really start with the business that they have in mind. So these are the things that I've been doing, and besides that, I have been in the forefront of Bhutan's young democratic journey. So I have been a founding member of the first political party in the country. I've contested elections, and but now I'm back in my business. I do travel business, and besides that, I still have birds. And the slogan for that program is "Wind beneath your wings." We will be the wind beneath your wings so that you can start your business and fly. So that's the program that I've been associated with, and thank you.
Sonam, could you give us a few examples of these businesses, that these entrepreneur ideas that you found really interesting?
Okay, these businesses are usually very small businesses. Young entrepreneurs just out of college wanting to start something because they can't find a job. So usually these are not, we came across few very interesting projects, like a friend of ours by the name of Karma Yuntin. He came up with doing some business on the trashes, like the plastic bottles, and it's called greener ways. So he's been saying that there's money in the trash, and he's been collecting trash and recycling them and making money out of it. That's one of them. And then we have a person who's gone to, who's educated, but wants to go back to the village and start a farming project. So his name is famously known as Farmer Sangye. So he came, and he wanted to start a potato chips factory. He had actually started that project, and he's reached that very last part where he was going to launch the product, but he was short of money. For a little bit of money, he was short of to launch that. And his vision was he was going to drive out Lay's potato chips out of the country. He was going to bring that his own. It's called Happy Chips. So then he came to us, and I helped him find an investor. And now we have Happy Chips in Bhutan. Lay's is still there, but his Happy Chips are also there. And one other interesting program I did was I started a weekend students program on entrepreneurship. And I had my daughter come and do that, participate in it. And so they were given a small amount of money, and they were supposed to create a business out of it. So my daughter, she did nothing out of this world. She started baking. And then later on, after a few months, she comes back to me and says, "Dad, I'm selling these baked items in my school, and when I'm ready to go to college, I won't need any financial assistance from you." So I mean, like, this is the kind of small projects, but it has a long-term impact.
Thank you, Sonam. Nikita, please tell us some of the challenges that you faced, while locating, let's say, investments, the challenges with regard to investments in the Himalayan region, especially in Nepal.
I don't know where to start from. So there are a lot of challenges. So I think I would divide these challenges in country level, company level, and more of individual level. So more of talking about the country and the macroeconomic problems that we have, starting off with bureaucracy. So, and the government regulators, the regulations, the approvals the number of approvals that we need to take. So we work with different industries have to take different approvals to get started. For introducing any new products, you have to get licenses. So there is a continuous interaction with the government bodies for any sector we work with. So, and for us, like we bring in a fund as FDI, so we have to take FDI approval every time we make any investment approval. So a typical FDI approval takes from somewhere between 3 months to even a year. So you can imagine how much of time and effort we are wasting, and the price that we are paying for that is like the investment can't justify that. So, and besides that, also a lot of processes are very manual and very paperwork based. I'm sure, I think World Bank and ADB are doing a lot of efforts to make things digital, but I think we have to work a lot towards that direction. And besides that, I think we can also talk about data. Like Nepal, like while investing, we have to do a lot of research to know about the person, the company, the industry, the market demand, supply, market size. And in Nepal, it's so difficult to find data. Like you can't rely on a data, and like there is no proper study behind it. So like, for example, we have invested in a pharmaceutical company for the past 3 years, and we say that 60% of the pharmaceutical products are imported from India. So it's something that is said by everybody from the Department of Drug Administration to all the ministers, but I saw that there is no study that backs it. So we are relying on just word of mouth. So that's one big issue. So it affects anywhere from start, even when it starts, like it affects us from when we get started for making investment decisions to later on during our valuations, and like it impacts our entire investment life cycle, this lack of data. And also, besides that, I think Nepal as a country, we need a lot of capital, like different varieties of capital, definitely venture capital, more of private equity funds, and we must be able to set ourselves as an attractive destination for foreign investors to invest in, right? So we brought in our first fund saying, okay, it is happening for the first time in Nepal. So definitely our investors have done a lot of due diligence on the team, on the prospect of Nepal, but also a part of it was, it's happening for the first time in Nepal, let's give it a chance. But for the future, we have to set a track record. Like investors are not going to invest in us again and again saying, let's give them a chance. So we have to set a good track record, and for that we have to establish our country and get things right. So that's the country level, and like moving into our entrepreneurs, the companies. I think the first key challenge that we face is environment and social issues. So this is something at the core of our investment. We make sure that the environmental and the social impact that our investment brings is positive. And it's very difficult for us to convey this message to the promoters and the management at the very beginning, and to make them realize that there is a value that you get out of all these compliances. Like, for example, you have a factory in the middle of a community, so you must make sure that your community is happy. Otherwise, like, there might be times where the community might raise problems for you, which is already happening in a lot of hydropower projects. So things like that, health and safety. So, giving your factory workers gloves or masks, these are like petty expenses. Obviously, it builds up to your accounts, but then at the end of it, you have to realize that how much are you, like, what are you saving by spending that, right? And also, like, environment and social also relates to, like, keeping your employees happy so that you can retain them, and like that saves a lot of cost. Like bringing in new employees is always a big cost for the employees. So that's one part of it. The second part is having qualified manpower, from the top level management to the blue-collar workers. As we talked a lot about migration in our previous sessions, I think it is a key issue that's affecting all the industries and all the entrepreneurs here. Is like Nepal definitely lacks qualified manpower at the top level, as well as in the worker level. Like, like it's funny, in one of our portfolio companies, there are a lot of women employees, which is good. Like, we do measure women employment, and you see like 70% of the women are women in a village. The factory is located in the outskirts of the country, and it's in a small village, which is a good thing. But the actual reason behind that is there's no men left in the village. That's why it's all women. there's no problem having women as an employee, but that's the reason, because there are no men left. So, and also like, that's why we are bringing initiatives to attract like NRNs and people who are all Nepalese who are already working abroad, and we have been successful, like in a few portfolio companies, we've been successful in bringing people who are experienced abroad back to Nepal and giving them employment in our portfolio companies. And besides that, also a lot of dependence in supply chain, especially in India and China. So there is a small problem with the equipment, and you have to bring in people from India, or you have to get spare parts from India. Imagine the time that takes and the waste of energy and money. So a lot of dependence on import is another big problem. And coming down to individual level, I think investment is more like a wedding, a marriage between two people, like the company and Dolma. So there has to be a lot of compatibility, a bit of compromising, and there has to be like the working style has to match so that we can go on for a long run, because we are here for like at least 5 or 6 years. So we would like there to be a good alignment of interest between the promoters and us, and things to grow smoothly. So, so this alignment of interest and everything is also very important. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Nikita. You mentioned China. I want to come back to Songqiao, because we rarely talk about the Chinese side of the Himalayas, the other side of the Himalayas. And Songqiao was telling me about her travels in Sichuan. I want to ask you, what lessons, what sort of challenges exist on that side of the Himalayas? And what are the sort of policy-making decisions, say, towards climate change, towards livelihood, that you think we can learn from?
Thanks for the question. And China is a Himalayan country, although we might forget about it. And Himalayan is the ecosystem that's transboundary, and sometimes we focus on this side of the Himalayan. And personally, I'm born on the coastal side of China, but I've done quite a bit of work in my previous role, working on rivers and water projects. So I've traveled extensively in Tibet, in Sichuan, in Yunnan provinces. And some of the issues I see are not dissimilar to this side of the Himalayan. So there's huge pressure to develop economically, and at the same time, hazards of natural disasters, seismic risk, construction of huge hydropower dams, and also mining projects, lots of infrastructure, the new railroad, and lots of highways getting built into these places. So in a way, the development of the West campaign in China for the past 10 years has really built and brought in a lot of economic growth into these regions. So lots of roads are being built, connectivity is greatly expanded, and it's very common to see a rural migrant from rural Sichuan to be working in the capital city of Beijing and commute during Spring Festival, during the Chinese New Year to go back. So during each Chinese New Year, China moves more than the population of the entire Europe in its train system. So with this infrastructure, it has greatly increased mobility within the country. And I think that the rural aspect, the rural Himalayans of China has benefited from having this access to the coastal cities, to the markets where they would buy mountain products, and also to markets where people can work. In terms of climate change, China is actually ahead of its target. So in 2018, it has already reached its carbon target for 2020, and also without compromising economic growth. And this, I still have to emphasize, is greatly achieved through the coastal regions rather than the mountain regions, by really cutting down emission, by really fostering low carbon growth, and trying to clean up also air pollution and pollution of these factory plants. And there has been some civil society initiatives in really looking at the supply chains of real estate, for example, of construction, of how to clean these things up. But in terms of Himalayan community in China, in recent years, actually just the past 2 years, there has been a village revitalization project that's a governmental policy, and basically reinstating that it is important for us to achieve ecological civilization. So beautiful rural countryside is very important, and mountain communities communities are very important. So would each village perhaps have its niche product, whether it's tourism or agricultural product or specialized processing that could be sold to the urban markets, because China also again benefit from this really extensive logistics networks. I can buy a jar of jam from rural Sichuan and just ordering on my phone in Beijing and have it delivered the next day. And the farmer can basically do the beekeeping and package at home and send it on one of these e-commerce sites. And at the same time, if he needs a spare parts, the glass jar, or he wants to buy something that's manufactured in Shanghai, he can also get it within 2-3 days. So these are the benefit that the huge growth in China has benefited. But I don't want to paint just a rosy picture of China, because there has been lots of displacements from big hydropower projects, from all of these roads. And I think the main instance attitude of the government is towards managing mountain communities better. So in a way, how do we arrange rural household? How do we manage the villages in a more systemic way? And that doesn't take into cultural diversity or traditional practices into account sometimes, so has resulted in environmental and social consequences. So it's a complex picture in China, but I do think that this side of the Himalayan perhaps can we also benefit from the access to the urban and coastal markets of China? Can we perhaps also benefit from the increasing logistics, e-commerce technology that China has to develop together?
Thank you, Songqiao. With migration, you brought an interesting point that Sonam and I were talking about. How he was talking about, even in Thimphu, there's a lot of urbanization happening because livelihood is not sustainable in the mountains anymore. This is something we've seen in Kumaon. This is something we're seeing in Nepal as well. I want you to tell me about the Bhutanese experience. What is happening? Is it the same experience as the rest of the Himalayas, or is it something different? What is contributing, and is the urbanization on a manageable scale right now?
Thank you. I think urbanization, when we did a study, it was done by UNDP, and it was found that Bhutan has urbanization rate that is one of the highest in the world. So we have so many people from rural areas moving into the capital city. Everybody who went through the education process, they don't want to go back to the rural villages because life is not easy there, and because there are no opportunities. As one of our friends from the earlier panel said, you have to create that opportunity. So Thimphu, our capital city, is really growing at a very fast rate. And this has been a very difficult issue for us. And now what we are trying to do is we are creating economic opportunities in the agriculture sector. Now the government's policy is that we want Bhutan to become a fully organic country in maybe 10, 15 years. That's a big ambition that we have. Right now, when the study was done, that it's found that about 85% of our agriculture products are natural and organic. So we still need, there's about 15% that we still need to work on. So that's what we're doing. And then once you have that economic opportunity, because organic products has a good market, especially from Bhutan. So once we have that market, we are hoping that our agriculture sector would create all these business opportunities for the youth. And the government at the same time is also giving a lot of very low interest rate loans for people who, especially the youth, unemployed youth, who are going back to the villages and starting small businesses in the agriculture sector in terms of organic farming, in terms of producing vegetables. And also we have this huge forest cover. And all of villages, rural villages, are located next to huge forest cover. So the forest has so much of renewable products, like vegetables, like all kinds of medicinal herbs that our youth can actually harvest and sell. So those economic opportunities are being created. And actually I want to touch upon one thing, that Bhutan has always followed a different path. Because we knew that Bhutan is a small country. We can't follow the path and the development path that other countries follow. For us, it has to be different. So that's why way back when we started our modernization process, our fourth king came up with cross-national happiness. It's a holistic development approach, and it's very different from the approach the other countries were taking at that time. So in that, there are 4 pillars. Among them is like the preservation of culture, and then environment, and then socio-economic development, and then the most important thing is good governance, leadership. And among the 2 pillars, we have culture and environment. Now, we've done so well in the conservation of environment. And when we look back, we find that cultural preservation has helped conserve our environment. Because in our belief system, in our tradition, we look at mountains as sacred places where the gods are dwelling. We look at the rivers, we look at the lakes, glacial lakes, as the dwelling places of water deity, and the water deities are associated with prosperity. So you have these glacial lakes from where the rivers flows, and then we have hydropower project down the valley. So in fact, it's proving it right, that the water deities are contributing to our prosperity. And that's why Bhutan's economy is basically dependent on hydropower and agriculture. And both of these are, very climate change sensitive. The climate change is affecting us a lot. And it's like glacial lakes outburst. The flooding that comes from there is identified as one of the most critical issue that we are facing today. And so in that terms, even today, we're talking about climate change, and I think it's really important for the whole of Himalayan region, particularly in our country. Our economy depends on hydropower and agriculture, and so that climate change is a big, big concern for us.
No? Nikita, I want to bring up something that Sonam just mentioned. So we know in Nepal there's been a lot of push over the years about these non-timber forest products, and agricultural sort of a revolution that we've been promised. In your experience, what have been the sort of bottlenecks that have not allowed us to do this? How, for example, what he's saying that there's a conscious effort to utilize forest resources apart from just the timber, What do you think has been Nepal's experience in this?
So I would talk more about how we have seen it as an investment opportunity, investing in the forest resources. So I think when we touch upon the forest area, it brings in a lot of environmental risk along with it, and that is the reason why, the ways to overcome those environmental risks comes up to be very expensive. So that is the reason why at times we are not able to explore as much of opportunities in the forest and timber sector as much as we want to, because there is definitely, when you talk about the paper industry in Nepal, we do not yet have a well-established paper industry in Nepal. But then how do we get into manufacturing papers in a clean way without, the byproducts that it brings? And are our entrepreneurs, and are we ready to take up that extra effort, which will also be definitely very expensive to carry forward? So I think that is the biggest bottleneck that we are facing.
Thank you, Nikita. Sonam, I'll come back to you. I think this is a larger question for all of us. So Bhutan, all of us know, it has a green constitution. It basically assures 60% of forest cover through the country. At the same time, one of its largest incomes come from hydroelectricity, which is what Nepal has been hoping for the past 30 years. I want to know how Bhutan balances the two. I mean, are there challenges? What sort of challenges do you come across? Are there, let's say, local opposition to, let's say, even you said that there were a lot of run-of-the-water, sort of like run-of-the-river projects, but even then, are there sort of local opposition? What is your experience?
Well, hydropower, actually, the way we harness is run of the river, and it causes minimal environmental damage. So basically we look at it as a clean energy. And basically, if you look at Bhutan, we are a carbon negative country. And to the world, we have promised at international level that we will always, for all time to come, Bhutan will remain a carbon neutral country. And that we are trying to do through two things. One is because our constitution has that requirement that Bhutan will always have 60% of our land as forest cover. Number two, we have initiated another program. Bhutan has 52% of our land as natural parks, nature reserves, wildlife sanctuaries. So 52% of our country is preserved in that manner. And for that to remain forever in this manner, we need 15 years donor assistance to manage that. So we have started an initiative called Bhutan for Life. We need 15 years funding from donors. And after 15 years, we'll take care of it ourselves. We'll not need any other financial assistance from any other donors. So that is what we have started, Bhutan for Life. And so these two are there. In terms of hydropower, I think, we produce about 2.2 metric tons of carbon a year. And the clean energy that we are exporting to the neighboring countries, sequestering about 7 metric tons a year. And when we harness more hydropower based on the potential we have, we'll be sequestering about 50 metric tons a year. So that's, we are already a carbon sink in that manner. So instead of harming the environment, we are becoming a more carbon sink for the neighborhood. So hydropower actually, I think, is good for us. And with regard to challenges, I think there has been some studies, and some people are saying, well, it's not as clean as you say. But, I think we are doing the best we can, because if we have big reservoirs, then we can have hydropower generation throughout the year. But we don't have that. That's why in winter we buy back electricity from India. So that kind of sacrifices we are making, and so that's the fact.
Songqiao and Nikita, this is for both of you. I just want to understand, how is this sort of a social, just this idea of a social responsibility? How does a society get this? How would, let's say, other countries learn from Bhutan? Anyone of you?
As I told earlier as well, it's very difficult to sink in the idea that being socially responsible will definitely add value to your business and do some ultimate benefit to yourself. But I think it's more of practice as well as you move forward, and like the experience that you bring as you are doing more of socially responsible business. I think, yeah, that's it comes as you practice. Otherwise, at the beginning, it's very difficult to accept, because you think it's one more thing to do and it's not going to add anything to your business. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bhutan offers a great example for the region with the Gross National Happiness Index and this whole emphasis on values and good governance and social responsibility. So I think ESG is not a new concept anymore, and businesses should have environmental, social, and governance behaviors, right? Really care about these things. And I would say in China, the Confucian value had a huge emphasis on social responsibility, that anybody to be educated, if you're able to provide more than your own family, you should care for the whole society. But it hasn't really happened like that in the market economy, that businesses usually take care of their own rights and had environmental and social responsibilities kind of as externalities. But from all the challenges we have heard about today, what we're facing in this region with climate change, with natural disasters, with seismic risk, and with 240 million people living in the mountains and affected. We can't take people out of the equation, right? Like social responsibility has to be the core of it. And we also heard climate change is creating 24 million jobs. Although we're losing 6 million jobs maybe to the fossil fuel industry or the polluting industry, we are putting people in actually doing work that's good for the environment and for the society. So I think this has to become an imperative, and it will become very important in how we do business in the future. And I actually think now that with the rise in kind of maybe looking inward as a species of all human beings, right? How did we come this far? How did we come to this far of bringing other species into extinction with our own demise? And maybe we should look at Bhutan and say, do we really have to develop in this way? And can we take that 15-year of grace period where China didn't, and probably still wouldn't, because China needs to really keep the economic growth. But I think there has been a lot of discussion in China about corporate social responsibility, about people's need for values, because now I work a lot with young people, and they're really growing up in a time of affluence. When I was a child, we still had power breakouts, we had water shortages when I was young, but the high school students I'm working with today, they don't really have that. So I'm bringing a group of high school students to Nepal end of this month. When I tell them some of the difficulties we might face, they will go to a rural homestay, maybe there won't be just running water all the time, maybe we'll face all these difficulties. They had like no idea really what they're expecting. And this is a huge change from their parents' generation. But at the same time, because they have this abundance in material, they can order any video games from the US and they can have things delivered to their doorsteps. They're really lacking values because they don't know what's their action for and what they can do with their life, with this one short and precious life. So I think there's a lot of things we can really learn from the Himalayan values from Bhutan, and inputting the responsibility back into people and back into how we care about one another and how we run society.
Thank you. I guess ultimately it is all about changing your mindset and thinking more about others than yourself. I'll move on to some questions. We have 3 questions. The first is directed at Nikita. Earlier, we talked about the circular economy and accelerating the process in the region. The question is, has Dolma Impact Fund made any strides in that?
Definitely, and we'd love to. Obviously, we have not directly invested in companies such as Doko Recyclers or the likes of it, like who are actively involved in the circular economy. But then I think when you talk about circular economy, it also is the practice of how we are managing issues like waste management, water treatment, and the likes of that in our portfolio companies. So that definitely is a practice we, like once we invest, we get into development of policies and make sure they're implemented. Like one of our companies, Cloud Factory, they do have Doko Recyclers as their waste collection, which came in after we invested. Similarly, we try to set other types of standards, like pollution standards, like if it's for a factory, how much of decibel of sound is suitable for the workers. So I think things like that contribute towards the circular economy. But having said that, we also have assessed a few businesses such as waste to energy, converting waste materials to energy, but unfortunately we have not made any direct investments yet, but then we definitely try to conserve that practice in all our portfolio companies.
Thank you, Nikita. Songqiao, this is for you. China has so many innovative environmental practices. Any best technological practices that you see being replicated in the region?
I think that's definitely true. Like, I was excited to see Doko Recyclers this morning because I was myself doing research about waste management and also like kind of water treatment plants in Nepal and what's happening. In China, there's a lot of incentives from the government to install solar water heaters, for example, or solar panels in individual household. So the whole renewable energy sector kind of just exploded with different size of companies. So I think that did have a government incentive in place, but China is already manufacturing all of these things. So I think someone from Nepal or Bhutan can establish a partnership with a Chinese company or buy from a supplier in China to bring these things into the region. And just before lunch, I was in a quick discussion about electric scooters. The city of Kunming has adopted electric scooters. There's no more polluting motorcycles. Why can't that be done in Kathmandu? And the city of Shenzhen has electrical buses for all the municipal bus systems, and I think that also can be replicated. Many small-scale waste management and change in business models. So I think China still has a grand target of actually reaching more recycling by 2020. Right now, it's like less than 2 years' time, and I'm looking forward to see how Beijing, the city, recycles 100%. Like that was the target, and China usually meets its target in one way or another. And I think this behavior change might come in changing business models and really changing collection points. In the city of Shanghai, I've just seen this year, there are all of these connecting posts, collection posts coming up for trash sorting and recycling. And I have a few friends who are young entrepreneurs who have started projects to recycle delivery packages. So you might know food delivery and e-commerce are resulting in huge amount of plastics that's going directly into our oceans. And at this rate, China is contributing to 60% of the plastics in the ocean. And in 30 years, we might have more plastics than fish. So this is just like a very urgent challenge that we have to face. How do we change the packaging practice? How do we incentivize people to bring back the packages and recycle them, reuse them into other products? So I think in China, because there's an urgent need, the challenges are so grand, that's why there just has to be innovation. And I think rest of the region, we should just not reinvent the wheel and see what works in China and bring it over. I see no problem in that, because a lot of innovation in China started in that way. We were copying what the US was doing and then innovating and doing it better.
I guess the question is about incentives and to use more solar, to use more renewable energy sources, I guess. This third question, it is a loaded question. I think all three of you can answer it as a sort of a closing address. A lot of times, the main challenges in the region lies within the countries that treat borders to be the main factor describing the region. How can we move past the borders and collaborate on addressing these challenges? So, Sonam, do you want to go first?
Well, I think like for Bhutan, we've always we've acted on like think globally and act locally. We've done that. And now with climate change, it is not possible. We can't just, by acting locally, we can't make any impact on the climate change. It's going to, like we're already facing the brunt of the climate change problems, like issues. So we have to work together. Now, if it's not globally, but at least regionally, we have to work together. So that is what we need to do. And with regard to the question you're asking, Himalayan consensus is the answer. So we need more like this kind of dialogues, sharing of ideas, learning from each other. Maybe some things that we do in Bhutan are not practical in Nepal or in a big country like China and India. But I feel like some of the things that we have done, if the big countries do it in a decentralized manner, from the ground up, we can still do it. So I think we have to, it's again in the mindset, how do you look at it? Maybe there's another innovative way of doing it. So I think we have to have more Himalayan consensus summit.
Nikita?
So I think the restrictions of borders are definitely lessening. So a typical example from our side will be our investment in companies like Cloud Factory and Fuse Machines, where the holding company for Cloud Factory is in the UK. We've got our clients in the US, and we've got all the operations happening in Nepal. So, and it's a very efficient model, like with employment being created in Nepal, the much needed employment that in Nepal is being created, and the clients in the US are getting these services at a very competitive rate through qualified people in Nepal. So this is one typical example. We've got another company called Fuse Machines, where the head office is in the US, the clients is in the European and the American market, and we've got engineers being outsourced from Nepal. So a lot of times it's them working remotely. So where is border? So we don't, so there is no problems being created by borders. It's different countries working together to address an opportunity.
I think the question is very valid, and not only in the region, in the world. We have some country who wants to build a wall where China has built 2,000 years ago, right? We thought we've moved beyond borders and political boundaries, but it's a real fact in the world right now. And I have to, transfer. There's no direct flight from Beijing to Kathmandu. There's no direct flight from Beijing to Bhutan. There's very few direct flights from Beijing to Delhi. So I think we are facing a connectivity issue and border-imposed boundaries in this region. But at the same time, we share the ecosystem, and it's the founding premise of WildBound, my organization, is that we share these ecosystems and we share this planet. So when we look at the watersheds, when we look at the Himalayan mountain region, we're all Himalayan citizens, borrowing Sujiv's term, that we really cannot let borders, this 2,000-year-old or maybe 200 years old concept, kind of blind us. And looking at the environmental challenges, looking at the social impetus that Himalayan consensus and working on the business level, for us, the youth on the individual level, building connections, building networks, and finding innovative solutions. So I think despite the challenges that we all know and the boundaries that's imposed by political leaders, we have to move beyond that and work on the bottom-up level in all aspects of society.
Thank you, Songqiao.